On Monday, we reported to you that the smart city agenda is coming like a freight train, and the US is absolutely on board. We told you about how Canadians are being threatened with $20,000 fines for going into nature. Those fines have gone up well over $100,000 now, actually. And we told you that this was coming to every country, including the US. It's important to understand that anything to do with surveillance, much of AI in governance, monitoring your movement, energy usage, digital currency, digital identification, even weather modification, all of these types of things are all part of the same agenda. That agenda is to lock you into a smart grid, eventually forcing people into 15-minute cities where everything they say, do, and even think is going to not only be monitored but also penalized depending on their compliance levels. It's a social credit system, far worse than anyone could conceive or believe is happening in this country with the current administration at the helm. But what you'll find in our report today is that this is very much happening in both blue and red states. Now, we want to start by telling you about a new bill in Massachusetts. Senate Bill S2246 sets the stage for the government to not only track how many miles you're traveling, but potentially charge you for your miles traveled and ultimately limit the miles you're allowed to travel in future. Lauren Fix Car Coach on TikTok explains. Let's take a listen.
Massachusetts is quietly pushing a bill that could fundamentally change how Americans are allowed to use their vehicles. Yes, you are hearing that clearly. Senate Bill S2246, introduced by Senate Majority Leader Cynthia Cream, sets the stage for a future where the government tracks and potentially limits how many miles you can drive each year. This isn't a fringe proposal. It's working its way through the legislature right now, and similar ideas are being tested in other states across the country. This is not a federal law. This is a state law. And at its core, this is not about transportation or emissions. It's about power and control. So what is actually in this bill? The Massachusetts legislation proposes the creation of a new government entity. This is state-based, not federal, that would track every vehicle mile traveled. They're calling it VMT, and they implement these policies to reduce them over time. In other words, less mileage allowed. Now, while the bill doesn't yet impose mileage caps, it does instruct state agencies to create a reasonable pathway to cut how much people drive annually. Translation, a government-mandated limit on personal travel is no longer hypothetical. It's being drafted right now. Now, Bill 2246 in the Senate also outlines coordination with automakers and the use of vehicle inspection data to monitor individual mileage. It even suggests changing to urban planning, encouraging the development of walkable neighborhoods and fewer parking options, all with the goal of getting you out of your car, whether you want to or not.
So as you heard there, she explained that within Senate Bill S2246, the inclusion of urban planning was made, and you heard what she said about that. That, of course, translates to smart city. We've reported to you about this website before, but we'll show you again because it's a very important resource for everyone. The site is globalcovenantofmayors.org. And if you search our cities on their site, select the country you want to view. For the purpose of this broadcast, we'll show you the US. It will show you how many cities are on board for the smart city agenda already. And you will see that we have Alameda in California, Aurora, Illinois, but then you also have Birmingham, Alabama. You have Flagstaff in Arizona, and of course, Lexington and Medford in Massachusetts, which makes sense considering this law. But you also have places in Florida. You have Utah. You have red states on here just as much as you have blue states on here. Texas. There are 7 pages of cities all across the US on that website. Now, she also mentioned in the video that other states are trialing this also. We want to show you this one article about Massachusetts specifically, and then we'll tell you who else is doing this. This is from carscoops.com. This state may make you pay for every mile you drive. Supporters say Massachusetts' Freedom to Move Act could cut car use and aid 2050 net zero goals. It says that if you drive more, pay more. Americans all over the country already do that via taxes on gasoline, but one state is considering taking the concept to a whole new level. Some Massachusetts lawmakers think drivers should be taxed directly according to the number of miles they drive, and a new bill could be this first step. If the Freedom to Move Act becomes law, it won't immediately kickstart a mileage-based tax program, of course, because if it did, there would be uproar, so it has to come in stages so that people don't notice too much. But it will give lawmakers a framework that might make those kinds of taxes a reality further down the road. And the article says, asking high mileage drivers to pay more isn't just a money-making scam, advocates say. They think the US state needs to radically reduce car use if it's to meet its tough emissions targets. Massachusetts has pledged to achieve net zero emissions by 2050, and experts think that's not going to be possible unless some radical steps are taken. So which other states are doing this as well? Well, Planetizen reported last year about which states are rolling out VMT taxes. You can see this map included in that article. Most states are taking steps towards VMT taxes. And we'll talk you through this. The darkest blue are states that have an active program for passenger vehicles. In the slightly lighter blue, states have active programs for heavy vehicles. In the lightest blue, states have participated in VMT pilot program. The yellow are states that are researching and or participating in regional coalition, and only the green, the very small amount of green that you see there as of last year, are states that were not involved with VMT at that time. However, we can tell you that as of this year, some of those states are now involved. And as is always the case with anything related to Agenda 2030, governments are doing this in lockstep around the world, especially in the West. It's all happening at the same time. This is where the red flags are. This is an Australian news outlet, news.com.au, reporting just yesterday, petrol, diesel, hybrid or EV, what new road user charge could mean for you. A proposed road tax by the federal government could change how much Australians pay to drive, and some drivers are set to be hit harder than others. Of course, this is basically the exact same thing that we're seeing with the VMT. It's saying it may not stop at EV drivers, actually, and it talks about the fuel excise, what Australians are currently paying, and that money from the fuel excise goes towards building and maintaining the nation's roads, but EV drivers currently pay nothing. The Productivity Commission has warned that Australia's $12 billion a year fuel excise is in terminal decline as more drivers switch to low and zero emission cars. So essentially, the government is charging the fuel excise, which is a tax per litre or gallon, and fuel costs, of course, keep rising. The government tells people they must buy EVs to save the planet and save on rising fuel costs. And then when they do, all of a sudden the government isn't making as much money. So now they're going to charge people to drive EVs too. And that is where the mandate to charge per mile comes from. And it's the same in every country. No matter where you look, they're all doing it. The government has their hands in our pocket one way or the other. But it's more than just a money grab. It could, in the very near future, mean that your ability to drive could also be limited by your carbon footprint and your social credit score. With the rise of technology and the technology in cars, computer systems, maps, navigation, carbon footprint tracking, social credit scores, and self-driving technology, your ability to move freely would be heavily impacted and hindered to the point of where it's totally out of your control. This must be stopped dead in its tracks. We encourage people to look at this bill, look at the progress of VMT in your state or whichever country you're in, and put an end to it.